I think 3 or 4 maybe.
At least.
At least.
So interest rates at the peak of when in your career were what, 18?
No, I was probably in the 14, 12s. Yeah, but we were, people were still buying houses.
Still buying houses.
I know, just insane. Hell, I paid off a 15-year mortgage at 9.25%. So
there you go. Yeah, I think sometimes we're so spoiled right now. I mean, they're practically paying us to buy houses, but with these interest rates. But people always need to buy homes regardless of interest rates. It may just obviously affect affordability.
True.
So, well, it's 2:04, and I don't want to waste any more time because I want to be certainly respectful of your time, and we have a lot of great stuff we want to cover. So welcome, everyone. Of course, you know me, and we got Brent Cooper, and I'd like to give Richard Exton, who's as an expert in this field. He's a longtime Nashville appraiser, and I invited him to this call. He was so gracious and willing. He's done a lot of work with other panels and education in the community. And Richard, if you could just give us a quick synopsis of, like you said, how long have you been in the business? And you said always here in Nashville, and launch us into what is it the best thing that we can do to be of service to your business?
Well, I have been, my entire career has been as a real estate appraiser. I started in 1983 and have done it ever since. I do a little commercial, but a lot of what I call dispute resolution, which is a lot of divorce work. A lot of times when an agent has a buyer or seller rather that thinks their house is way up here and they think it's, way down here, I'll be asked to come in and provide that service, do estates, do some unusual litigation related things, just a wide variety of things. But for the past, 10 or 15 years, I really have not done that much mortgage work. I do relocation work, and I do measure houses for agents, but not that much mortgage work. Happy to do it, but just don't get that much calling. Probably the thing that is most helpful to me when I do come to a house which is on the market being sold, whether it's a relocation or for a mortgage, it's helpful for me to understand how you price that home. I mean, what's the basis for what you did when you pulling together the comps that you utilized to set the list price? And I realize sometimes it's dictated by things out of your control, but it's helpful to understand that. And any market data that you've acquired over the listing period is always very helpful. But I will warn you that it's kind of a double-edged sword, because oftentimes, the agent will hand me a list of comps that are 3 miles away and significantly bigger, or they just are not comparables, and that's usually when they're just desperate to find something to meet what they've gotten a contract at maybe a little above market, and they're desperately trying to figure out how to support that. And sometimes you just look at the comps and go, yeah, even you couldn't justify this list price or the sales contract price. So be careful of that. And we're challenged right now, especially even though COVID is obviously rearing its head. There are, a lot of times people missed out on opportunities to buy their houses, and they're a little enthusiastic with what they're willing to pay. And, so it's sometimes a challenge, especially in mortgage work, where you have the contract and you're looking it over, and it just, they had a meeting of the minds, or you can tell that, multiple contracts, and it sold very quickly. And it's just really above the market. And we do struggle. sometimes these days with people who have missed out on several opportunities and because they've been beat out by somebody else, and they're just a little too enthusiastic with what they're willing to pay for the house. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now.
Gotcha. So in the you mentioned you do a lot of dispute resolution as far as determining value, and I suppose we probably feel like we do a bit of that ourselves as agents when we have a seller that believes their home is worth one thing and our comps show another. What are your general rules of thumb or appraisal guidelines in determining comps, such as, is there obviously, just in best practice, if this is available, tries to be within the community, within 6 months, within a mile, or what is I know you have to go outliers at times, but are there general rules of thumb?
Well, I would like to do 6 months. Some lenders are really picky about that. Proximity is something they're concerned about too. But sometimes you have to go out of the market. I mean, in a well-established market where there are not very many sales, or, I just looked at something that's surrounded by Radnor Lake. Well, to find comps, I'm going to have to jump over Radnor Lake, which is going to really push me much further than I normally like to go because, well, there are no houses in there. And so, there are no sales. Sometimes you face that sort of thing. And I think sometimes appraisers don't do a great job of explaining why they had to expand their range, and they get mad because the underwriter wants to understand it, and they make the appraiser, add more verbiage, and but circumstances dictated, or it's an unusual house, like nobody else has a basement, but this was on a little rise, and the sale has a base. I mean, the listing has a basement, and you really want to find at least one comparable that has some finish in the basement. You're looking for sales. So, sometimes you'll go. I won't go back more than a year unless it's unless it's an exceptional thing. When you're talking about $4 or $5 million houses, you're going to have to go back further in time.
Yeah.
But a year pretty much is the limit. But I'll keep going further and further, expanding my search for sales.
Gotcha. And then, we typically use no further than 6 months. Is that still a good rule to use, or do we need to be looking at 3 months with the amount of?
Well, obviously the thing that went under contract within, this most recent contract date is most important. Sometimes you'll have a sale that occurred closed last week, but it went under contract 3 months ago. So, it just depends on the market, whether there's enough information, but, you're trying to compare apples to apples. And so the most recent information you can find, the most similar in size, the quality, age, condition, amenities, you're trying to get the sales that match up closest. And sometimes it's more important to have the sales that match up physically than timeliness. So it just really depends on the situation. And I'm afraid I'm going to use "it depends" quite a lot because it does. And so, I'm going to tell you a rule of thumb and then probably turn around this afternoon and break that rule. But
how much variance or tolerance would you say? I know you operate under national guidelines with respect to appraisal standards, and then obviously we're not selling commodities or widgets here, so there's variables to these homes and what people do to them. Do you have pretty much free reign at the end of the day, and how do you describe that to an underwriter? Is there a sort of a narrative that you provide with that? And
well, underwriters love cookie cutter subdivisions where, you can find 5 sales that are within 200 square feet that closed last week. That's what they seem to think, that there's this plethora of sales out there and that you should be using them. But we all know that's just not the case. And so I think if you go back further than normal, or you go further away than normal, you need to document why you did it and explain it. And you're still going to get questions, but you try and do your best to answer the questions on the front end, so they don't call you up, but they inevitably will. It's just the nature of the beast.
Gotcha. All right. So do you prefer, if someone's going to be getting value, one of the things we try to do, or we want to put ourselves in the best place to assist and not be a speed bump, if you will. And I know sometimes we may be a little overzealous or ambitious to try to help you, as we all want to think we're doing. But what have you seen in all your years of experience? What's the way that an agent, like you said, you want to know, how do we price that home? Is that something you want us to meet you there and share with you, or write up a narrative and leave it in the home with our comps and improvements? What are things we can do to make this the best experience for you all?
I want a list of the upgrades written down so I don't have to, and inevitably the seller's there and they're trying to remember all the things that they did, but and that's typically included with your listing package, the upgrades. But any marketing materials are helpful. Oftentimes I'll arrive and the agent's got a copy of the contract with, because sometimes we will get the contract, but they will not have all of the counter offers in it. So that's a bit of an issue sometimes. Copies of comps that they're aware of, sometimes comps that you're familiar with, the fact that it was a divorce and they, I remember having one that just was way low and couldn't, looking at the pictures, I was going, what's going on? This looks great. And, the agent said they cleaned that house up for the pictures. It sat on the market for 6 months. They never did a thing, and it was always a wreck every time I went there. And, it was a divorce, and they just took an offer. And that explained why that comp was not something anybody should be using. But it would have been helpful if, after the fact, maybe maybe in the realtor notes that they made, divorce, house in horrible condition or something, added something, so I wouldn't have had to call the agent and, kind of swap messages trying to get that information. Other thing I'm finding is so many pocket listings do not have great descriptions, or they don't have any pictures with them. And pocket listings, they're going to bite you all in the ass. And because, the information's bad. Honestly, it's not fair to the seller, because you're really not providing them with the broadest possible, purchase prices. But the lack of information in pocket listings is troubling, and the fact that you don't know how long it was truly on the market. It'll say 0 days, but good and damn well it took longer than that. I mean, honest information is really helpful. And the ones that are coming soon, that instantly pop up as sold on the, come on, people. Sorry. I'm going to get off my high horse on that one.
No, this is helpful, because we can help be lobbyists for your, as they say, shit rolls downhill, and unfortunately, everybody's getting it at the tail end. And as much as we could do, even if it was, I think what I hear you saying is like calling these pocket listings or these comps that we see are 0 days on market, and it just says, for comp purposes only, and there's nothing in there. It's like, well, you can't really use it as a comp, right?
Right. I almost can't use it as a comp. It might have been the best sale in the subdivision, and it makes sense. It supports, what your contract is, but with no description, I can call the agent, but frankly, lately people have not been real good about calling me back. And, if I can't get some information about the comp, I can't use it. And, but if they've taken the time to put a few pictures in and write a narrative about the fact that, there was, I don't know, brand new hardwood floors and fresh paint and the kitchen had been redone, then I could use it. But without much information, or, the amount of time it would take them to do that is the amount of time it's going to take just one appraiser's conversation with them. And, everybody benefits by putting in a full description of the property. The other thing I've been finding lately is a lot of people are saying that it's the square footage is from tax records, and it just doesn't match what the tax records are saying. I think it's probably worth $150 or $175 I charge for somebody to come out and measure the thing, and then you've got an accurate square footage. And I'm sure there are other people. I know there are people that do it for less than that. So, find out how big it really is. And I know that if I come in lower, you're going to use the tax records anyway. So,
Oh, we're trying to do everything we can to help the whole machine, but we all, I know as Brent agrees, this is a team sport. And what we want to do is help be great ambassadors to address some of these things that, I've never made it part of my racket or my platform, if you will, to help ensure no village agent or any agent that I know is putting in for comp purposes only, because we kind of know, but I don't think until today did it totally click how much of a disservice and almost nullifies that comp entirely. And many times I've seen that is the highest sale, because the damn thing sold either pre-market, so somebody paid a premium, or pre-completion, and they just didn't want to go back and finish all the details from new construction. So you have my word that I'm taking your message to the streets, Richard.
Well, I appreciate that. I've got another one.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's all complain about the new picture system in the MLS.
We've been doing.
We all click to close out that window of the pictures and shut down our search. I can't tell you the number of times I've done. We need to all unite against that and have them change it, for God's sake.
Well, you may not be a part of some of the message boards that are happening, but the call has been put out, and I can assure you, I don't know who made the post. I think it was Lee Fund maybe, and it just ripped from there. Everybody was like, absolutely, that happens to me multiple times a day. And if you all don't know what it is, be glad. It's just a user interface dilemma in RealTrax that they are working on, Richard. So
okay, well, good to know. I complained on one of those message boards.
Well, good. I think they're listening. You mentioned measurements. I know you do measurements. I try to encourage agents to never try to be that person that will measure, because we don't want that liability, even if we could skill ourselves to get there. But what are your some best practices in measurements? Are we measuring from the outside or the inside? Are the bricks included? What are we doing with measurements these days?
Yeah. The reason square footage is based on exterior measurements is because it primarily began with the tax assessor. Nobody was letting the tax assessor in their house, so they're measuring from the outside. And MLS requires that you measure based on the American National Standards Institute's residential square footage, which is exterior, heated and cooled, It has to have, you count everything that's 5 feet and above. The room has to have a minimum of 7 feet for 50% of the room. There's a whole, it's a whole long thing, and it's probably worth spending the $20 they charge you to buy the standards, but it lays it out very well. So, I mean, things like, you count the stair treads and the landings, but not the second floor open foyer. And a lot of appraisers don't include the stairwells and stairway and landings, so you're losing a little bit of square footage there. But search American National Standards Institute residential square footage. They're going to update it fairly soon, but the only real change is that you can now include painted basement floors. That's about the only change I could see in the requirements. You used to not be able to include those as finished unless it had a floor covering or the floors were stained. But we could talk about square footage for days.
Yeah.
But it's almost worth, if you can find a class on it, just to take it to understand whether or not what you're getting back is correct. Did the appraisers zag when they should have zigged? I think so.
Can we see that from the drawing? I mean, because we're familiar with looking at the drawings and the numbers you all provide, but would we be able to see if they accounted for the stair and treads and landings?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to show up as, I think if you're familiar enough with the house, you'd be able to tell whether or not they included them. The way if they cut out one big square in the foyer, they probably did not include the stairs and the landings. But you're going to get in a pissing match with the appraiser about that one.
Yeah,
and sometimes they're very hard to measure with curved stairs, and the architects are making it very difficult to measure the open space in the foyer these days.
Talk about the top of the chain, not understanding maybe the bottom of the chain. That one's always interesting. Of architects draw these beautiful pictures and don't account for where the HVAC chase is going to go and things like that. But it brings up a point. I just did a quick calculation on my phone. If you had I guess a stairwell isn't 6 foot wide, but let's say that it's 4 foot wide by, let's say, 20 foot long by the time it turns. That's 80 square feet times, let's say average, we're in $400 a square foot. That stairs cost $32,000 in value. My math isn't wrong there, right?
No, I don't think so.
You don't need.
I don't know. 80. There aren't that many 400. Let's say 300. That's 24,000.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a lot of money. Simply on a stairwell measurement, and I don't want to get in the weeds of price per foot, because I joke that homes, that's like buying a car by the pound, and all square footage isn't the same, but it's an interesting. This measurement is becoming more and more important as these values, price per foots, become higher and higher. And I think what I hear you saying is it's probably best that we hire someone and we have a dialogue with them of what is your practice in measuring, such as the stairs and landings and things like that, right?
Yeah. Well, I think I think that you'll work with some people and you'll find out whether that's their practice or not. And but you're right. It does represent a fairly significant amount of square foot. Can represent a number of square footage. And if somebody gets in an argument with you, ask them if they would count the square footage on both levels if there was no open foyer, because the stairs, on a 2-story house, say it measures 50 by 25. That's 1,250 feet per floor. If it doesn't have an open stairwell, would he have counted the stairs and treads on the second floor? Of course he would have. because the math, I mean, they would have included it if there wasn't an open foyer, but don't include it when there is. And that doesn't, that's my argument with people when they, if that's maybe the way to ask them or explain why you think they ought to be counting the stairs on both floors.
Well, it's hard, we're not trying to get in their basket, right, or in their lane, but it is a worthy question that we want to have discovery on and make sure we have understanding. Same thing with the architect, right? How are they counting?
Well, but I mean, the truth of the matter is, I mean, relocation companies, if you're within 100 square feet, they're not going to argue with it because, a tenth of a foot here and there, and I measure the nearest tenth of a foot, is, that's going to add up to some. You could have 100 appraisers, and I swear to God, you get 100 different square footages on a house. But so there's going to be some variance.
Yeah. We have to have tolerance for that. I just, when it gets into 100 feet or more, like you say, at 400, $300 a foot, it's starting to get pretty stout. So yeah. Well, we mentioned measurements, and I think you brought up a bad word in the appraisal and opinion business, and that is the famous, infamous basement. So tell us, Richard, from what I understand, basement footage is some of the most expensive footage to build into a home. It's subterranean, you got to deal with water and all that, and yet it is typically not valued the same as above ground footage. Is there a rule of thumb? And what should we be preparing our sellers and owners about refinishing their basement and what their expectations on what they'll get back?
Well, there are a couple of things. If you priced a house with a basement and it's not selling or you're getting negative reaction, you have probably overvalued the contributory value of the basement's too high. I think that would be your first indication. And the difference is that square footage in a basement is measured still from the exterior. And there's several things. First of all, it's likely on slab, which is not as comfortable as walking on joists. Two, it's going to have the veneer, concrete block, some gap, then the stud wall, and the drywall or the paneling, which means that even though you're measuring from the outside, the usable area inside is going to be less. And this is particularly in an older house that's got a 1.5 2 foot thick stone wall foundation. You're measuring from the outside, but you're losing 2.5 feet to the foundation wall and the stud wall to create the finish. It doesn't have as much daylight. It is going to get water penetration. I'm sorry. It may not happen for a while, but at some point it is. And some point you're going to have to replace the carpet and probably replace the drywall, the paneling. And it's just an expense that people, can count on if you have a basement. Maybe you get lucky and it doesn't happen to you, but at some point water will find its way into a basement. I don't care who did it. And I think for those are some of the reasons why people don't pay as much for basement space as they do. Maybe it does cost as much to build, but from a functional standpoint, there lots of people like to put a closet in a room in a basement and call it a bedroom. But if your granny can't get out the window, then it's not a real bedroom. If it doesn't have any windows and you can't immediately get out of the basement to the exterior through the window, through a secondary, you've got a door coming in, But if you can't get out immediately to the exterior, then you can't count it as a bedroom. So lots of times there's a lot of big rooms that just don't have a lot of function in a basement. And that's, that also, I think, contributes to the fact that people do not pay as much for it as they do for above grade space.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you that in a sense of it isn't as nice of space of above ground, but it does cost more to build, but that has no bearing. So just for everybody out there watching, just because it costs more doesn't mean it's worth more. That applies to many things in life, but is there a value? Let's say your above ground footage, let's just use that 300 number. Do you give it a percentage value, or how do you give it the number?
Well, the problem is that basements vary so significantly. Some of them you got daylight out just out the back. Some are older houses where they've got super thick walls and the usable space inside is less. You get some basements that are completely dug out, and you can maybe get out and go up some stairs, but there are just so many different variants in basement quality and condition. And I was in a house a couple of days ago that had 9-foot ceilings, very nice. Probably it's worth more than the one I saw yesterday that was a dugout basement. They'd finished it, but the ceiling height wasn't very high, and you'd have to go up the stairs or out a door and then up some more stairs. And so I am reticent to say how much, because it just really depends on what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But
and
definitely less. And maybe the solution is to find a sale, find some sales, even if you have to go back a while, find some sales with finished basements.
Yep.
and see if you can tell the differential. I mean, say you went back 2 years ago and you found a sale that was with a basement and one that's without, you could do the math and calculate what the differential was as a percentage and apply that to the sales that you're using now to get a sense of what it is. But it depends on neighborhoods. A pool in Antioch's not worth what it is in Belmead, even though they're the same pool.
Well, I'm saying, and we're going to come to pools here just next, but let's say the basement had 9-foot ceilings and was a walkout. So it's as close as it could be to above ground footage. Would you give it a rule of thumb of no more than 75% of the above ground? Or
from a listing standpoint, as an appraiser, we treat things differently, square footage differently than you all looking at $1 per square foot. I mean, that'd be a rule of thumb, but if you're not getting much action on that property, the reason is you probably overvalued the contributory value of the basement.
Yep. I got it.
But here again, try and find at least one comp with a basement.
I've had a lot of opinions on it, and I've heard anything from 50 to 25%. And again, no hard, fast rule there. Obviously depends. Yeah. How finished is it? Is there a window? Is it a walkout, full daylight? I mean, there's so many factors, but we get into those challenges in there. And so, getting a pre-listing appraisal is a good idea as well, to get another party's opinion like yourself to help validate what it is we're looking at or assigning value to. You mentioned,
I'm not sure a pre-appraisal is necessary. I mean, to be honest, I think that a good agent can do as good a job as an appraiser can. When you just can't figure it out, then it's worth hiring a third party that's disinterested. I think a good agent can do pretty much what an appraiser's doing. And the advantage you have is that you can, if it isn't selling quickly, you can make some adjustments in the pricing. So
we don't have to put a stamp on our price and send it to an underwriter to complain at us. The market just tells us if they buy it or not, right?
That's right.
Yeah. You mentioned pools. Pools is a hot one right now. So pools are in huge demand. There's a backlog of people wanting to get a pool. And obviously, I'm not going to ask you what the value of pools are. We know that those can vary wildly. But are you, I think when I've been here since 91, and initially, we used to say pools don't really increase the value of your home. And I think that has significantly changed within the last year, and certainly since COVID, as people are more are nesting and dwelling in their own spaces and looking for independent recreation. That wasn't a weird way to put all that. So would you say that the value of pools, are you giving more contributory value to pools? And how are you handling that now versus 2 years ago or more?
I think that anecdotally, that's right, that people do seem to want more pools. I've always told people, if you want a pool, buy a house with a pool and let the guy who put it in eat the cost, because they're incredibly expensive. And I'm not saying they aren't justifiably so, but they do not return. I mean, the return on investment on a pool is just abysmal. And yes, a lot of people want them, and they're willing to, I think they're willing to pay more for them, but they're not willing to pay nearly what they cost to put in. I still don't think they're doing that. And honestly, all these people are going to probably spend a lot of money putting pools in, and they end up wanting to sell their house, and they're not going to get their money back, because desire for pools like screen porches and granite kitchens, that it's up now, but it will be down at some point in the future, and they're all they're maybe not granite, but hell, I spent $70,000 on my screen porch, and if I get 20, I would be just dancing on the ceiling for it. But we use it all the time, and we love it, and it was worth the money to us. And that's sort of the attitude you're going to have to take with a pool, is that if it's something that's important to you and you're willing, you can spend the money and enjoy it, but you're not going to get your money back out of it unless you wait 20 years. And people find that they're a great deal of effort to maintain. I spent most of my wayward youth at Seven Hills Swim Club cleaning that damn pool. And, I would thank God I was being paid for it, because it's, there are a lot of work to keep up, and they're expensive to keep up too, because every once in a while, you got to resurface it if it's gunite, or replace the liner if it's a vinyl line pool. They're not quite as bad as boats, but I think it's one of those things where that pool owner's the happiest the day they get to swim in it the first time, and then they're the happiest when the next happy is when they sell the house and get rid of the effort of having to maintain that pool.
Right. All right. So one house, we got two houses in a subdivision. All things are the same. Let's just throw that in quotes. Very similar. And you're having to make a value adjustment based on one's got a 2-car and one's got a 3-car. How much does that look like about?
Well, it would depend. I told you I was going to say that a lot.
Tell you, this is worse than politics, buddy. I get it.
Well, I mean, if everybody else in the neighborhood has a 1-car garage and you've got a 3, that's a super adequacy. That's, that probably doesn't have any, very little contributory value. But if everybody's got a 3 and you've got a 2, then, the expectation of the market is to have a 3-car garage, and it's probably an adverse thing. So, it is going to depend on what's the expectation of the buyers, how much impact it would have.
All right, we're not going to get a straight one on that. I get it. So, what about if we see a discrepancy in an appraisal, and I think this is the thing, I've learned that disputing an appraisal is highly unlikely of any change to occur. Do you have any tips or suggestions for us about if we see an inaccuracy or we believe there's a legitimate reason to dispute, how we would go about that, and I know it could be what's involved in that, or consideration from the appraiser's perspective about how it may influence their, the underwriter's confidence in their accuracy. I mean, we're all humans and make mistakes here. How can we work through things like that?
Well, I think it's all driven by the lender and their process. I mean, most of the time you're dealing with an underwriter in God knows where, and I'm sure their corporation has a system that you have to go through. So, right or wrong, you probably have to go through the lender's system as to what you have to do. I think sometimes, things like errors in square footage could have been eliminated if you'd had somebody measure them. Now, I get somebody else's measurements, I will check them out, but it's at least somebody else has looked at it. Occasionally you don't open what you thought was a closet and there's a half bath there. I mean, you make mistakes. Everybody does. But I think you're probably primarily dealing with lenders, and they probably have a set policy of how to do it. And I think you just have to work through the system. I can't advise you beyond that. If I do it for you and you say, hey, Exton, there's a half bath there's a second half bath on the main floor that you missed. Well, I'm going to be embarrassed, of course, and I'm going to fix it for you. But, you are paying for our professional opinion of what something's worth. And, when I am coming in at a number below the contract price, I will always give the buyer's agent an opportunity to provide me with more information before I let the appraisal go. I don't call the seller because their job is to be the seller's agent. Excuse me, I don't call the buyer's agent, I call the seller's agent because, the buyer's agent fiduciary responsibility is to get the value as low as, it's reasonably possible and renegotiate if they have to. But I'll give the seller's agent an opportunity to provide me with additional information. And, sometimes you miss something, you set up your MLS search and things get missed because of the way it's the quirks of the system. But, if I'm low, I'll give you an opportunity to provide me with more information. I'm not going to say I'm going to use it, but I'm happy to consider it. Like I'm happy to consider any information you give me on the front end. I'm not saying I'm going to use it, but I'll at least consider it.
You're not offended by us providing any of that?
No, but my understanding is some are. You're just going to have to read the room.
Yep.
Provide it. Don't push it on them. Say, look, I put together this package. Take it, leave it. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, I know as we're all busier, the busier we are, the faster we move, the more likely there can be oversights, right? And so I think, again, it's more about creating a team atmosphere that we're not trying to overinflate values, right? I mean, it gets validated when somebody is willing to make an offer or go under contract. And that brings me to a great question that Beth Vincent had that texted me here. So she says, every time I comp a house today in hot areas up to 400,000, it's hard to find comps as prices keep going up. I have to look at pendings, which aren't closed, but you can assume will close at or over list. since they went under contract so quickly. Usually that's the only way to justify offers to your buyers. I only look at 3-month comps. How do appraisers view pendings and in situations where we have prices literally going up every 30 days?
Well, we can make time adjustments, which is, you know, in a moving market, that's what you do. You know, and if you've got a comp down this, I mean, a pending down the street, and you're, you know, you're able to get the information about the contract price and the closing date, that's very helpful information. And I will call agents on pendings, and sometimes they'll disclose it and sometimes they won't. You know, and it really depends on how far along they are in the process of, you know, if they're about to close it, they're probably more willing to share the information because, you know, it looks like the deal's actually going to happen. Yeah. You know, if it went under contract yesterday, they're not going to share that information because they just don't. I don't know. They don't want that information out, and, you know, to get out if things don't work out. But it is, you know, pending. Sometimes that's really good information if you can find out. But we can't make those assumptions. The appraiser can't make those assumptions like you can that it's sold for at or above the list price. I mean, we need somebody, some member party to the contract to tell us what, you know, what is the contract price and when is it expected to close.
If you were to get that information, can you use that as a comp, or is it an outlier? Like you still need 3 sold comps and then you could use these as supporting data? Or
well, I think, you know, they're especially helpful if you're making a time adjustment. Okay. To say, you know, this is you know, this is 6 months old, this is 3 months old, this is last month, and I have this pending contract at X, and it, you know, I can show you that it's making the market is moving forward. You know, and because I do, you know, a lot of my business is not lender related. I have a little more liberty as to what I use as sales data. Mm-hmm. Although it's not pleasant to sit on a witness stand and talk about a pending sale. Lawyers love to attack you on that one.
Best money spent on return of investment on for an appraiser for valuation, adding square footage, or what improvements in the home?
I think consistency in renovation is probably the thing that I see as the biggest improvement. It would probably be better if you spread your money out and did facelifts to the kitchens and the baths than to build a whiz-bang kitchen and your 50s baths, although I know that's all groovy now. Just they're going to stand out, your 80s bath, let's put it that way. It's going to stand out as desperately needing renovation. So I would say spread your money across the house so it's, you know, it's consistent, or at least so you've got the master bath and the kitchen have been updated. You know, don't put in new cabinets, but maybe put in new counters and backsplash, and put in new counters in the master bath. So it's relatively consistent across the whole house.
That makes sense. Yeah, I can't see cabinets bringing I mean, a cabinet isn't just a cabinet, but I think some people go pretty over the top, and I don't know that there's enough value adjustments for. I mean, do you care if it's soft closed doors and drawers? Does that matter to y'all? No,
I don't care. I mean, although they point them out, let me tell you.
Of course they do. Of course they do. Like power windows and a seatbelt, kind of just a given these days. I'm going to open it up for other questions, and I want to respect your time. I have a few more if you've got a couple minutes.
You know, I've got a 4:30 Zoom meeting.
All right. We're going to be done sooner than that. Let's see, Rebecca, I think you asked appraisal contingencies. What are the most common ones, and how can we avoid them? Is that for more real estate, Rebecca? Is that for more us?
Well, I mean, if it's an appraisal contingency, I think the biggest challenge right now with appraisal contingencies is that agents are not giving enough time to, to find an appraiser to get them out there to get the job done. That's the biggest challenge I have, because, I get 2 or 3 calls a day and say, well, we're going to close next week. We need an appraisal. And I say, well, let me give you some other names. There are a lot of, there 10 days is not enough these days. You need to call the appraiser you want to use and say, how long is it going to take you to get this done? And we'll write the contract to reflect that. I think that's really the best advice I can give you about appraisal contingencies, is make sure that you're being realistic about getting somebody out there.
Okay. How do you deal with waterfront if there's not a lot of comps? Something's got on the water with a dock, and I know that's become, waterfront's really popular and in demand right now. And if there's not a lot of comps, is it better to go back further to definitely compare waterfront because that's such a differentiating factor? Or how would you give preference to that if you had comps that weren't waterfront?
I would not ever use, I will never say never.
Okay, we get it.
I will go, and I have gotten the tax maps and highlighted 2 years worth of sales and followed the perimeter of Old Hickory Lake looking for sales of waterfront property, and I'll go 5, 6, 7 miles away because you have to. But you need to compare waterfront to waterfront, and you need to. And a dock is worth something more than a permit's worth something, and a dock is definitely worth something. So you need to make your comparisons as best you can. To properties with docks, waterfront properties with docks, if yours has a dock, you need to make sure that those are really significant things in the value these days, especially.
Gotcha.
So definitely waterfront, and if it has a dock or a dock, a permit's worth something too, even if it doesn't have a dock.
Gotcha. Beth, you chimed in about rooms being subterranean effect value. I think we highlighted that. You may have jumped on late, so we'll come back. We talked a little bit about basement and subterranean rooms, but what about forced air too? Central heat and air. If a room has baseboard heat versus forced air, do you make adjustments for that?
It would depend on if it's a Florida room and it's got permanently installed baseboard or a through the wall unit, I'm okay with that. If it's a converted garage and it's got baseboard heat and the rest of the house has central, it sort of goes to the overall quality of that space, and I may try and separate it out and treat it differently because chances are they put carpet down on the slab, and I've seen them where they didn't even take the door down, and they just sealed up it obviously didn't contribute that much to value, but it really, everyone wants central heat and air, and so probably the impact is what it would take to install it, even if it was just if it's one room and you looked at the cost of one of those ventless systems.
Yep. And I think you touched on it earlier, to be a bedroom, does it have to have a closet? We think it's a closet and a window, but is it an egress window by appraisal standards to call it a bedroom?
If it's below grade, think about, could your grandmother get out that window? That's, you can have windows that are way up high that are just in a well. Those don't count because you can't, it's not practical. My fat ass couldn't get out them. So You need a closet, but if it's a house that was built, say 1920s or earlier, where, bureaus were the thing. I mean, armoires, that's how everybody did. It's okay not to have a closet, in my opinion, as long as it's got access to the bath on that floor. Just because you put a bed in the living room doesn't make it a bedroom. That's sort of my answer to that. But an older house that's Victorian era, where people didn't typically have closets, I'm okay with counting it as a bedroom without a closet. But if it was built after that, yeah, you got to have a closet.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, Richard, I want to give Richard a hand and some love for his time. And I got to say, I think there's plenty of people that say they don't want my job. I don't want your job. I don't envy the role you're in a lot, but I respect and appreciate your service, and especially a veteran as you are, have done it as long as you have in our area. You're
well, stupid is as stupid does, right?
There you go. I think we all feel that way about our jobs some days. So
thank you, guys. Richard, give me a call if you have any questions.
We will. We'll be sharing your contact information, and you can expect more calls. We appreciate you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Everybody else on the call, I'm going to share something that Brent provided to us, and that is, I'm going to go over to, let's see here. Let's look here. So Brent is sharing, and let's see here. Brent creates this comp packet. Brent, I'll let you share a little bit about this as far as what you leave in the home, and there may be some other suggestions you have, or you may tweaks based on your conversation with Richard. But can you tell us about what you provide here?
Yeah, so actually, here it is here. I bind it. So it's a pretty little packet with a business card. And so it is a packet that I build on every home, and it stays in their file. So I build it on day one, and I pull comps throughout the history of the, from the time we list until the appraisal, for the same reason that he said, because there may be a house that closes a week before the appraisal or something that may help you out. So all of this is printed. The majority of this is also in the home for the buyers to review as they're coming through as well. So it serves as kind of a packet for everybody to see. But
so was this this isn't necessarily your brochure, is it?
It is not my brochure.
Okay. No. But you would leave one of these, you put like a note in there, please leave in the home?
I do, actually. There's a binder that goes into every home. And so in this, you've got the cover page, you've got the seller updates with any pictures, or, I might even put, the brands in there too, because that may make a difference.
Yep.
I've got my comps, and then I also give them this sheet too, the thumbnails of the comps that I pulled.
Yep.
The comps, I usually go anywhere from 6 to 9 months. And again, I include the map. So you can see I'm the middle dot on Spain, and I've got 3 homes directly around me.
Yep. I think this is great. I love you include this, the way you're including the CMA. I like you doing the quarters, the agent quarters versus the full page. It just helps bring a little more brevity to it. You don't want to load them down with too much paper. But I thought it was interesting. He said include the full contract, because they sometimes aren't getting all that.
Right, and you can do that. I know agents that do. I'm a firm believer of less is more, and so don't give them 15 comps. Don't give them 5 comps. Give them 3 solid, good comps that justify the price that you priced at. And so
it's interesting. You even mentioned here removal of 3 large dead trees and a cement pad. Like, that's nothing anyone is going to see, but it certainly was a cost and an improvement to the house. And I think that's part of what they're looking for is anything that can help justify it. And I guess my takeaway from today is there's some additional work that we can do to really, as part of our value, and you may want to sell this when you're sitting down taking a listing, is what you're going to do to prep the appraiser. Because, 2 hours time is going to pay you off greatly versus just, I would always meet them there and bring comps and answer questions. But I think having something a little more substantial they can take with them, because we really need to remember they're in a hurry. They're like inspectors. They're banging out as many as they can in a day. It's not just because they're trying to be greedy and make money. They're under that type of demand. And we have to remember, every refinance gets an appraisal almost. So
there's another thing that I suggest too. So when the appraiser calls me, I write down their name and their number, and it goes automatically into my calendar.
Yep.
And so I call them the day before, or I text them the day before and just confirm, hey, are we good for 10:30 in the morning? They love that communication. Is it okay if I meet you? Absolutely. I meet them. I stand out of the way. I give them this packet. I answer any questions. We go on our way.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer, again, that if as a listing agent, it is my duty to meet the appraiser. I'm listing the house and I price the house. If the listing agent, if I have the buyer and the listing agent is not going to be at that appraisal, I am going to be at the appraisal, because again, all of us are working together for a common goal, and that's for the seller and the buyer for the transaction to close. So whatever we need to do, especially if they go over in price, then I'm going to partner with that listing agent to make sure that we can try to get it to price.
Excellent. Yeah, I have made a mistake. One time recently, I did not write their number down, or if I did, I lost it, and I could not find that appraiser to save my life. That wreaked hell on us because it happened to be one where there was a dispute between the underwriter and the appraiser. Nobody else was upset about it. The appraisal came in at value. The appraiser believed it was worth the value, and the underwriter did not like the adjustments the appraiser made. And there was a pissing match between the underwriter and the appraiser that was holding up the file. And I was on the buyer side, and everybody was just sideways and upset. And then nothing could be done until I got a hold of figuring out, try to get to an underwriter, on a USAA loan or whatever it was. So, looking at a lender that has local underwriting is important. But, those are the type of things where I think we forget so much of our value is having this type of knowledge. This is not on Zillow. This is not consumer level stuff. And I think we need to do a better job of educating our clientele and social media of what are some of the other ways that you provide value. And Brent, I thank you so much for sharing what you did. I think your comps are great here. I noticed you did include actives, and that's interesting.
I do not. And so on this listing, I had several agents that had listings on Spain, and one of them came in, they were listed at 419. The appraiser came in at 412. And he called me and challenged me on this price point. But we had so many finishes on the inside that I didn't use a single one on Spain. I went and found homes within a mile and a half radius that had the same details my home had. Archways, really intricate woodwork. I mean, all of that stuff. And it justified my price.
Yeah. And we'll add this to the 7 reasons why Chad Wallers has the best business model, because selling condos, you don't deal with this shit.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't worry about archways. They all got the same appliances. Everybody's got the same thing going on. So condos is cake compared to this. Historic homes, I think, are the most difficult and require the most work. And so be mindful to that, agents out there. If you are listing, the older the home or the more unique the home, the bigger the bigger the challenge. So.
And I've gone out sometimes. I've gone out 31 miles on an 1890 farmhouse on 2 acres with 2 barns to try to find comps to justify. So sometimes it is a challenge.
Yeah, as we know, our work isn't done at contract, and this appraisal stage will become more and more critical as our market escalates and or de-escalates. It just gets that much more hairy when you have a market crash and you're doing short sales and trying to get as much value as you can when somebody's upside down. So don't worry, I've been through all that. If we get to that, we'll have classes on that. So any other questions before we part? It's great to see some old faces here. Zach Zola and Beth Hooker, I see you down there. Beth Vincent, love that you're on here. Appreciate your direct text questions. Rebecca, you have an added point here? Yes.
a question. So going back to you get a professional measurement before you list, and just playing devil's advocate, if the professional measurement comes back lower than what's in the tax record for square footage, is that then I don't know if it would be an adverse fact or just something that you would have to disclose?
That's a great question. I've had it happen to me, and yeah, I mean, do we have any professional responsibility to disclose that a professional measurement came in different than a tax record? That is very interesting.
Because that's really going to suck if I recommend that they get a professional measurement because we think that it's actually too low in the tax record, and then it comes back that it's actually high, it actually is lower even than that, and then they have to disclose it. So just asking.
Well, I guess what I would say is professionally, you should change it in the MLS.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that checks the box. Obviously, you should probably advise the other side that you have done such in case they don't print it out or go look again, which they most likely would not once they're under contract. But I think a modification to the MLS, it is a fact, be it adverse, that I think are, obviously we are legally required to disclose.
I agree.
I certainly think we should, but that would be, I would think, a risk if we're advising like, hey, look, I just, the one that's that we're closing tomorrow, tax record says one thing, the owner says another and says it's higher, but she didn't want to get it measured. So, but if we had gotten it measured, it could have come back even lower than what's in the tax record. So.
And it's not uncommon for the tax record to be off. I mean, that's a pretty common piece of challenge.
And I guess you're hedging your bets, right? Maybe this, maybe the person that orders that is the seller, and they just let us know what they want to let us know.
There you go.
That may be coy, but I mean, I don't want to necessarily be in that position unless they want me to be in that position. So I need to advise them of what the risks are, and that they order and pay for that directly, and the results are sent strictly to them. And then they can let me know what the findings are.
Sounds good.
I think that's my final answer, Alex.
And that is incorrect, Teddy. Sorry, you were wrong. I'm kidding. I don't know.
Probably not. No, I don't know. Yeah, but I like that one. I like that one in the sense that it helps minimize my liability to having to make that choice or have them disclose something, right? Like if they don't tell me something on that listing presentation, if they ask me, then unfortunately the cat's out of the bag. I think the same thing goes in this example. So, Brent, I know you do some additional education on appraisals, don't you, as part of your Mentee Monday piece for our people that want to dig further?
Yeah, we do. And I'm more than happy to post it on Facebook when we do it.
I would love that. I would love that as a follow-up. I'm going to post a link to my notes and my chicken scratch on that Google Doc, and a link to your piece there. And feel free, everybody, to comment on there about any additions or tweaks to that. I try to just kind of scribble down some of the things Richard was saying. I'll clean that up a little bit, and then we'll let it ride.
Sounds good. Thank you, Teddy.
Cool. 10-4. Appreciate you all. Brent, thank you so much for all the questions and sharing your piece on that. Very, very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you,
all
guys.
Right.
Yep.
Go make a friend and influence value.
Right.
Take care. Zach, I'll follow up with you. I know I owe you a call.
Sounds good.
All right. See y'all.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.